Hi, and welcome to Drafting Compliance. I'm Kayne, he's Tom, and we talked about the key challenges when first starting the journey to ATO last time. Today, we're talking about system and information integrity. But before we get to that, we have some beers. What are we drinking today, Tom?
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about this because I've not had many Japanese lager, and that's what this is. It's by FedRAMP.
FedRAMP, yes. FedRAMP down in Hood River, Oregon, where my buddy Cody and I went on a ski trip for a fairly rainy weekend, and he saw exactly how much beer he could pour into me in 3 days.
Well, what's interesting to me is that there's a Japanese lager coming out of Oregon. But so, I have had a Japanese lager. I can't remember the name of it, but most of your hibachis have such a thing. And, they're generally pretty light. So I'm going to assume it's a pretty light and sort of almost champagne-y kind of beer. So I'm excited by it. It has a really cool
sounding
sort
promising.
of kind of old world black looking can, which is cool.
Yeah, it's kind of got some texture to the label here too. It's hard to show it on camera, but it feels like this red label was added in post.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say is that at FedRAMP, I remember they had a pretty good brewery down there. They had an outdoor seating area with big fire pit, and I remember the food was pretty good too, just overlooking the Hood River. Probably a better place to go in the summer to watch the wakeboarders and paddle surfers and kite surfers out there. But we were there in the dead of winter where it just decided to rain on us continually.
Well, I would say that good food at breweries is not the norm. It's probably the exception. So that's a good thing.
Ooh. Cool.
All right. Well, let's crack
Are we going to try opening this up and
see
how it goes? Okay. Fair.
Yeah, it's already got sort
of
that
a very
faint
smell. Oh my goodness. I can probably, this is almost white.
Yeah.
Okay. It's clear. Oh, it's yellowish actually.
Yeah,
okay. Now I'm going to make it fit.
It's got bubbles. It's very light. It's way lighter than
little bubbles.
It's very, very light. It's much lighter than the camera picks up.
Yeah.
This is, Bud Light in terms of color.
Aren't they one of the cursed brands these days? Aren't they having a marketing problem?
Yeah, it's a silly marketing problem, but they are having a marketing problem.
Okay. Well, we will not have that. Instead, we'll just have Japanese lager, which, what's the ABV on this one, Tom? Lately, we've been having some fairly high ABV.
I think it's 5%,
ones.
if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, 5%
you should be able to shotgun this one right now, and we'll be fine for the rest of the episode.
Let's smell it. I took a quick breath. I tell you, it
hold
smells...
on. I want to have a go first, because
okay.
Otherwise you are going to put your thumm on this, and I will have an opinion based on what you said.
All right.
I'm kind of smelling a little bit of grapefruit, and maybe wheat. Maybe wheat, or what's the other thing? It's beer. Hops. I know beer. That's kind of all that's coming through. There's not a lot else coming through in terms of what are you picking up?
I'm picking up a little different. My first smell was very bready, like heavy bready. So almost like you just cracked open a fresh, crusty loaf. And then I'm getting a little bit of plum kind of scent underneath there. I mean, it's faint.
Huh. I was drinking some wine last night that had a bit of a plum cherry taste with some vanilla, but not getting plum off this.
I'm going to taste this.
We'll see how it tastes.
Very similar to what I had anticipated, certainly to the last Japanese lager I had. Extremely drinkable. Like,
a little creamier than I had expected. Kind of tastes like misspent teenage years, honestly, more than anything else.
I mean, if you're not a beer drinker, I would think this would go down pretty easy. This is sort of the Michelob Ultra of craft beer.
Just dropping all the mass names on this. All of those are big brands, I imagine, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing offensive in this beer. It's very easy to drink. It's very, American Pilsner-like, very light Pilsner.
It is pretty thin.
It's very thin.
It's pretty thin. Thankfully, it's not offensive.
It doesn't have, some other beers that kind of look and
But it's got
core
an
like this would be
aftertaste.
like a Stella. It does not have the flavor characteristics of like a Stella or similar. So this is very, very light, very unoffensive, very easy to drink.
I think when I was in the Netherlands, they were serving something like this, but it came in like shot glasses because it had to be kept cold. I don't remember what that was, but we were at a disco. Anyway, it was cold. Didn't taste like much. You know what a disco is, Tom.
I do, but in 2023, I don't hear the term disco all that often. So
Well, fine. It was La Discotheque, so there you go.
Okay.
Fancy, right? But we're not just talking about beers and dancing, though. Actually, I think that could be great content for some other channel. Instead, we're talking about FedRAMP Moderate. And Tom, I wanted to start by asking about the challenges that our team has faced so far in really maintaining the integrity of systems and information while complying with the FedRAMP Moderate requirements.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. This family of controls is another sort of catch-all, right? It's all about like, how do you maintain the integrity of systems and data? How do you detect unauthorized changes and those kinds of things around it? So a lot of what is in this family of controls are simple best practices that most organizations have already sort of wrapped their arms around on some way or other. And the same is here. There's certainly some gotchas or things that we have to change in our own space because of the language of FedRAMP here. They dial in pretty tightly on firmware. I would say most organizations don't do a great job on firmware. So if you're not updating firmware and keeping an eye out on firmware, that's going to catch you here. Certainly caught us. I mean, in terms of our change process and our update process, firmware is somewhere on the, hey, we should check this once a year, right? That was traditional. We're going to do this much more stringently going forward. It's going to be a monthly check on firmware. So that's a big change. Certainly the automation that is suggested and required in this family of controls is also a challenge for us. Smaller companies, automation has not been, sort of top of the budget. Now with FedRAMP, we certainly are putting automation where we can. So be aware that in this family, automation can be a challenge.
Is the firmware requirement because of the kind of the twofold fear of either interdiction of motherboards and other components being shipped to the United States, combined with the typically rather garbage update processes that most IoT and motherboards actually have, where HTTPS and man-in-the-middle attacks were never even a consideration? Is that what's driving it?
Yeah, certainly that's driving it. Also, there have been vulnerabilities that have been found at the BIOS level.
Of course, yes.
In firmware levels, right? So just overcoming the idea that this is a blind spot in most organizations, I think, is the intent of this this smaller subset of controls underneath this family. But I think we can agree that never updating firmware is just a bad practice. So I think this is
I think that's a fairly good thing.
Yeah, I don't
Although
think
I
this
think
is
also
a bad ask.
There are definitely risks of firmware that can only be updated by dropping it in the wood chipper and buying a new one. Ultimately,
yeah, I've seen systems bricked during firmware updates. There's no doubt about it. Now, the good news in our sort of implementation, there's not a lot of firmware to worry about. We're dealing with virtual machines sitting on top of hardware we don't own, so we don't have to deal with that firmware. This is the firmware piece for us is largely laptop based. So
that would make sense for those laptops that actually access the FedRAMP environment.
You got it.
All right. Well, I want to talk about implementation a little bit more. So how has the implementation of the system and information integrity controls really affected or impacted our overall cybersecurity posture at Hyperproof under FedRAMP Moderate?
Yeah, like any of these control families, we are finding the gaps in our current deployments, and we're fixing those gaps, and we're maturing our security posture. So every one of these families we go through significantly matures our posture. It takes what I think are pretty good best practices and adds that extra ounce of maturity on top of it, right? Of diligence around it. So there's not been a huge, especially in this control family, there's not been a huge gotcha in terms of implementation. IDS and IPS is part of this control family. Azure has built-in features in their firewall. We chose to up it a little bit in terms of how we can get data out of that and not just leave it to Azure. But those things are built pretty seamlessly into the Azure stack. I'm sure they are into the AWS stack as well. So those of us that are lucky enough to live in the cloud, we have our downsides with it, but we also have our upsides. And some of these easier services to consume are those upsides. So, a lot of the pieces in kind of fits that you have in legacy environments, we don't have those problems here. We have.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah, we're not having to engineer security into something that was not correctly designed. Sorry, that's opinionated, but I can be opinionated, right? And something that's not been designed correctly with security in mind.
Well, I would say, to soften that blow a little, Kayne, I would say that when you're talking about legacy enterprise, folks that have literally maybe grown from mainframes, maybe they were paper in the beginning, right? And they'd grown through the mainframe phase, and suddenly somebody brought Novell in, and then somebody brought Microsoft in, and they hey, look
this
at
is
this
like
Active
Throwback
Directory,
Thursday,
right?
buddy. Here we go. We got Novell mainframes and the discotheque.
But these sort of legacy installs have a very organic feel, right?
Oh,
and
goodness,
you
yes.
just have so much you have to overcome. We didn't have that problem. We had really a 4-year build that we had to look at and say, how can we improve upon what was already really best practice from the get-go?
All right. And just thinking of that, how are we really balancing the need for those robust controls around system and information integrity with our ongoing operational demands and the typical resource constraints you see in a cloud environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. So like many folks that are going through FedRAMP, we are building 2 environments, right? So our gov environment is getting all the attention, but it would be silly to go through this process and not let it influence your commercial implementation as well. So we are certainly doing that. So there are, I would say the philosophy is these are company-wide controls until there's a convincing reason we can't do those controls in the commercial side. So, there are things that we don't implement on commercial because it simply would hinder the commercial implementation. But in general, we're trying to implement across the organization these controls. So that does create a challenge in terms of, we run on a 3-week sprint. So all of this implementation has to get sort of shoehorned into these 3-week sprints with us. But we did some early upfront planning and those things are going smoothly. So we have largely deployed the things in both commercial and gov environments that are required for this family. So I'd say we're balancing it really well.
Cool. All right. Well, I want to ask you about some specific controls, if I can. Is that okay if
Sure.
I ask you? Okay. So I just want to start at the top. So SI1, which is the System and Integrity Integrity Policy and Procedures. What challenges have you really encountered with enforcement of those?
So like every control family, the number one requirement is you have to have policy and you have to have associated procedure. Policy is easy. Us information security guys can write policy in our sleep. We know it. We know that we ultimately aren't the ones that have to comply to most policy. It's the operational groups that do. That's always the challenge. Here at Hyperproof, all of our procedures are sort of bulleted out in Confluence, which is really easy to consume for the engineering group. Not so easy to consume for auditors and things like that. So one of the challenges is to look at our procedure as it was built and say, okay, is this really what we're doing? Which largely we've done that. And then put it into a format that is consumable by auditors because we know that's coming, right? So that's been a challenge, but I would say after an initial education sort of process that we had to do to make sure everybody sort of understood what is the lift with FedRAMP, the engineering operations groups, they're coming right along. They're not putting up a fight. They're asking good questions and they're getting the work done.
But that's kind of just across the board. Anything specific in system information protection or integrity, or not so much?
I think I probably covered the biggest challenge, and that's, hey, we've got to figure out the firmware piece of this. We understood already, logging, and we understood this. A big chunk of this is logging. We understood the need for IPS, IDS. So that was already in the works. We do vulnerability scanning, so a lot of the pieces that are critical to this, they're already in place. So it's really about documenting what's in place is the challenge.
Fantastic. And if you're enjoying this conversation on YouTube, ring the bell to get notifications about my quest to find literally any beer that's drinkable, or subscribe to this in your podcast app of choice to make the show part of your routine. Now, Tom, how are we addressing SI3, which is malicious code protection, particularly in the context of the increasing number and sophistication of malware threats these days?
Yeah, well, you certainly want to have malware protection that is bringing in capable intelligent feeds, right? So we do that. We have a server-based and laptop-based AV protection. It's good. It pulls in feeds. It's automated. Everything good about it. Where we had a gap was in containers. So, if you were to follow the rational thought processes around containers, you'd say you don't really need AV inside of containers because it already sits at the base layer.
Right.
But clearly with FedRAMP, we have to have it in the container. So we are going through the processes currently to get that same protection inside of containers, really looking at it from a different perspective, right? We want to have capable reporting and visibility, but we don't necessarily want to have it making rash decisions inside of containers. Containers are a different sort of environment than like a server is, right?
Yeah, so, I could see that totally.
That approach gives us some caution on what product and process we choose to implement, but we're getting there. So I can
imagine also that companies with Kubernetes must be struggling with this one.
That's us. Yep, we are largely
okay. So that's
Kubernetes.
our specific implementation.
So,
okay, all right. Wasn't sure if that was us specifically. All right. Well, let's move on to I don't know. How about SI5, which is security alerts, advisories, and directives? How are we actually keeping abreast of and responding to the latest security alerts and advisories in a timely manner?
Yeah, I said the words in the last topic we talked about. Right, we've got to have good intelligence feeds. So, we have a SIM provider, and our SIM provider has inputs for multiple intelligence feeds. And the idea there is the sum of all the parts is greater than the one, right? So we can pull intelligence from their overall network of detection capabilities and anomalies, and get quicker rule sets implemented in our own environment to face emerging threats wherever they may be. For those of you who don't necessarily have a set of feeds that you use today, there is a bunch of really good free intelligence feeds out there. I go out and peruse them all the time. Just go do a Google search and you'll come up with them. I look at Abuse. Cisco Umbrella puts one out. I mean, there's a bunch of really good feeds out there for intelligence, including whitelists. So if you're looking to how to build your whitelist, those exist out there as well, free and available. Just make sure you're pulling them from reputable sources.
Yeah, I think that's the key there, and also to not confuse what we call threat intelligence with actual threat intelligence, because what you're buying is, like, if you're paying for a feed, you're probably doing it wrong. Personal opinion there, because that has to have additional human intelligence typically applied to it to make any kind of determination as to whether or not it's legit, because otherwise it's just data, right? And you need analysts to actually work on it, right?
That's right. I would preface a little differently. You're going to buy product. You're going to buy a SIM solution. That will generally come with an intelligence feed built into it from their larger installed base. So you're essentially paying for it as part of your product line. But that's still
for a separate differentiated one. It's not part of the base product.
I think that feed though is really important to include, because what you're getting is, like, say you use Splunk. You're getting the entire install base of Splunk and the intelligence that is being drafted off of that entire install base. That's really powerful. Some of these others have, Cisco Umbrella has a huge install base. You can get that feed. These are really good feeds to have. Some of the ones that are a little more niche, you might look at those and say, I want to pull that because my industry vertical suggests I should have it. They won't necessarily apply to everybody, but go out and see what's available, because you will find absolute gems for your particular install in terms of intelligence feeds, and they're usually free.
It's very true. I want to also ask about a weird one that's in there, Tom, and it's SI8, spam protection.
Spam. Yeah.
And I looked at that and I went, okay, this feels like a bit of a hard fit, like it didn't fit anywhere else. So just thinking of spam protection, what unique challenges have we dealt with, and how are we actually ensuring effective spam protection while maintaining system efficiency?
Yeah. What's interesting about this control family, and honestly, a bunch of them that start with the word system, is they're kind of catch-all control families, right? And so you're right. There are things in here that you have to kind of look sideways at to see how they fit. Spam protection is a little bit of one, although if you think about sort of data integrity, yeah, it does fit. Spam protection is, to me, this problem is solved. Like, we understand how to deal with spam largely in the world, and if we don't, we're probably not doing our jobs very well. This is not unique to FedRAMP. We happen to be a Google Suite user, so we have Google Mail. Google Mail has really good spam built right in, but we can tweak it, and we have tweaked it, so we get better results. As you probably know, Kayne, as somebody who's been in this space, every time you tweak a rule, you always risk losing good data or good email. So that's a sort of a ongoing battle with the rule set. We fight that battle just like any other organization does, but largely we have it tuned to the right place. I delete probably 30 what I would call spam a day, but those 30 are really call list or email mailing list mails.
Oh goodness, yes, yeah,
so,
yeah, or LinkedIn in mails that are from some BDR or SDR.
That's right. So their services,
cold emailing,
they're sort of expected email. Yeah. They're not true spam. But other than that, I don't see a bunch that come through. So I feel really confident that our solution works. For other organizations, I'm sure they have spam already in. In fact, you and I have both consulted at hundreds of companies, and when you consult at hundreds of companies, you get a feel that spam has largely been dealt with, because if it isn't, you have CEOs that are raging mad. So this one gets dealt with.
Yes. Yeah, that checks out. Well, I want to ask about one other specific control in this control family, and it kind of goes to the way that systems get compromised around input validation. So it's control SI10, and I wanted to ask what it's been like, what the development team's approach has been like to SI10, particularly in terms of validating the integrity of data inputs to prevent security breaches.
Yeah, what's interesting about this one to me is, anytime you have a web application, you've largely already thought of what inputs are coming through that I want to expect and what inputs might be put in that I don't want to expect, right? So in the case of this, we already had the majority of the sort of verification, error inputs and all that nailed down. So we already know we can't put in strings that aren't expected. Those get just sort of circular bin, for lack of a better term. So in terms, what this really is asking is if you have a line of input, will it take some sort of string that might call an unexpected executable? Will it take some sort of string that might cause a buffer overflow? Will it air out your application in such a way where it crashes the overall platform? These are the things you worry about.
Right, or like things like a SQL injection attack, for example,
that's a great
to be able to retrieve the entire contents of a database.
That's right. So what most web application developers already have in place is a whole bunch of validation on input long before it ever gets to the point where it could execute, right? We're the same. So the big challenge with this is to go back and document what you've put in place. You've probably dealt with developers in your career, Kayne. Developers put wonderful intelligence into their code, but they don't always document what they've put into code. So
one of the best developers I ever worked said that's why we call it code.
Yeah, that's right. So we go back and we have to basically sit with those folks and document exactly what they put into code, put it in some sort of a process or procedure document so we can show it to auditors. And then of course the challenge with FedRAMP is to always pull the evidence for it. So we have to go back and find where we can pull evidence of that capability.
Okay. Oh, okay. So we've already baked that in. Last question on that. Does that also and I can't remember, does the control include a WAF, a web application firewall, or is that covered down as somewhere else? Because
No, if
often
you
we see WAFs as a way of doing input validation.
yeah, I don't believe anywhere you will see the word or the abbreviation WAF in FedRAMP. But I can tell you, if you read all of the controls in FedRAMP and it crosses families, you'll come to the conclusion what they're really saying is you should have a WAF. So that's today we do it with code. In our federal .gov implementation, we will have a WAF sitting in front of the application. And
Got it.
It'll do especially a bunch of the pre sort of user input filtering, right? Still do the user input filtering, but there is a significant risk in web apps of bots essentially just hammering the front end, and that's really where WAF comes in strong.
Cool. All right. Well, with that, I think we've covered everything in this one. Let's talk about this beer. Tom, how have you been doing on yours? Because we see how I've been doing on mine.
Well, my can is empty, and
and
that's where we sit.
Dear me.
So
I could finally make it fit. Hey, there we go.
I think I'm doing pretty good.
I usually have about the top 1/8 of an inch of beer. It's a legitimate measure, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the smell has changed. I got a bit of citrus there, which was unexpected, more than just the grapefruit, but
I don't.
I'm still not smelling the bread.
See, that's
Tom, you must have
smell.
some kind of fancier bread than Wonder Bread. That's got to be it, right?
Do they even make Wonder Bread anymore?
I'm going to have to go check my refrigerator to be sure.
But no, I do. Bread is what I smell when I smell this. I still smell, it's a sweet fruit.
It's definitely something sweet there.
I think a plum is what comes to mind, but you can,
maybe like a yellow plum, like those Italian ones.
Sure, let's go with that. Let's
go with I was thinking red or purple plums. All right,
but it's definitely got a sweet smell to it. I will say this variety of beer in my world doesn't sit well in terms of like letting it air and get warmer and all that. These are the kind of beer I like to drink quickly. So.
All right. Well, I'm going to have another sip just to see if it's changed from a flavor profile. It still has bubbles in, which is fun. Yeah, it tastes like misspent teenage youth. Yep. You want to review this one first, and then I'll have a go? Or all right.
It's what I would expect with a beer like this. I've had, like I said, one Japanese lager. The reason I don't have many Japanese lagers is they're all pretty thin and kind of lack the character that I like in beer. Other people like this. I can think of a couple of my friends that would really enjoy this. So, I'm not going to go out and buy this. I'm certainly not going to stock a Japanese lager in my refrigerator, just like I don't have many American Pilsners floating around either. Usually have one or two for my son's friends, but that's about it. So in terms of beers that I'm going to go out and buy and drink and enjoy, I'm not going to do that with this. I'd probably give this a 3 on a scale of 10. And it isn't because it isn't drinkable. It's very easy to drink. It's just not enjoyable to me to drink. I want some more hoppy character. I want something that draws my attention and makes me question what it is creating that flavor. This just doesn't have any of that.
My goodness. Okay, so we're about to have like history being made on the show here. So I like that it doesn't have a lot of character. However, having said that, this is still not the sort of thing that I would go out of my way, that I would go to a store, that I would actually think of ordering, because my friends bring their own beer and my kids don't like beer, thank goodness yet. I mean, still 18 and 16, so they probably shouldn't.
Well, I'm going to tell you that they might like beer. You just don't know that yet.
That is a fair description of my childhood, Tom. Thank you for bringing it back again. I'm going to give this a higher rating, though, than you. You gave this a 3, so I'm thinking of the things and the faces that I've made with a rating of a 3. This is definitely closer to a 5 for me, in that it's not terrible. I wouldn't voluntarily go out of my way to drink it, but if it was between this and not drinking anything, Oh goodness, no! I was going between this and like absolutely drinking nothing. I would drink this. If I was dying of thirst in the desert, this would be a fantastic beverage to have on hand in lieu of water. But I'm going to go with a 5, which this is interesting. You gave it a 3, I gave it a 5. There we are.
I believe that is the first time you've had a score higher than
I
me.
think that's the first time we've actually flipped. And with that, that's all for today. If you think you know a beer that I'd like, apparently I like thin, boring, flavorless, dull, kind of like me, really. But if you think you know a beer I'd like, or if you have a FedRAMP question, drop it in the comments below. And remember to like our LinkedIn and YouTube pages to hear live interviews with information security professionals. With that, we're out. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.